I'm Bree, one of the co-founders of Frank Body.
Hi, I'm Jess, one of the co-founders of Frank Body.
Welcome to Selfish, a podcast that is all about putting yourself first and redefining the word selfish.
Over this content series, we're exploring a variety of topics with some amazing faces that you'll know, from self-awareness with Brooke Blurton to self-discovery with Jackie Gillies.
We're also talking about self-pleasure with Chantel Otten and self-wealth with the incredible Victoria Devine.
Podcast episodes for Selfish drop weekly on Tuesdays, alongside a whole bunch of amazing tools, tips and tricks from our team that you can find across the Frank Body social channels.
Find us wherever you listen to your podcasts, and let's get selfish together.
So we just wrapped up a really fantastic chat with Erin Deering. For those of you who don't know, Erin is a longtime friend, an Australian entrepreneur, mother, co-founder of Triangl swimwear, and author of Hanging by a Thread. And there were some really obvious reasons why we wanted to get Erin into the podcast today. Hey, Bree.
Yeah, I think when we first started talking about this series, Erin was one of the first women that came to mind. We've followed her journey for a long time. We've had quite similar experiences. Obviously, she's had a lot of success and been on a very different journey to us. But I've been particularly inspired by her when it comes to motherhood and this idea that you almost need to be selfish in order to serve your family, and that being selfish is actually giving more to others. And so it was so amazing to unpack that a little bit more and hear it firsthand from her.
I love how Erin has been so open and vulnerable, especially over the last 12 months with her own journey of self-discovery and redefining her self-worth. And so when we just were deciding on the topic that we wanted to talk about today with Erin, it was just obvious that that journey of self-love, self-worth, self-discovery was what it was going to be about. And she shares so openly and honestly in that chat. And I think that you're all really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, there's going to be something in there for everyone. I think people who are starting a business, people who are just feeling like they don't know what they're worth or like struggling at that moment, to people who are going through motherhood. Yeah, I think there's something there for so many different people.
So sit back and enjoy our chat with Erin Deering.
Welcome, Erin. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm very thrilled. Very thrilled.
So this whole series is about being selfish.
Great.
And the right version of selfish.
Yes.
Which I know is a topic that you like to talk about, which is why you're here. I think before we dive into the nitty-gritty, it would be good if you could set the scene a little bit. I think we never like to assume that anyone knows who any of us are.
Yeah.
So tell us about Erin from wherever it feels suitable for you to tell us. Okay, get people, what's the Twitter version of your journey?
So I'm 39. I have 4 children. I'm the co-founder of Triangl swimwear. I am Australian, born in Melbourne, born and bred. I lived overseas for the business. I actually exited Triangl kind of at its peak due to my suffering mental health. Moved back to Australia and sort of had to start again. Lived through the pandemic like we all did, and have been mentoring, advising, working on myself. And now I am in a really great place. I got married this year. No more kids. I'm done with 4. And I'm launching a new brand next year. So that's me in a really quick
How much
nutshell.
can you pack into 30 seconds? That is impressive.
I actually want to ask you our last question first.
Yes, me too.
I know, and that is, what does selfish mean to you? Or being selfish mean to you?
I am the biggest advocate for being selfish. It's one of the first... I remember I used to wear selfless like a badge of honour, and this was especially noticeable after I had my first baby. And it was that thing where it was like, I'm selfless, and that is the one thing that I can attach my lack of happiness to, because at least I'm making other people happy, and that kind of felt like it was good. It was like you wear it like a badge of honor. And then I realized that I was super deeply unhappy, and perhaps that was because I was lacking any sense of self at all. So selfish to me is putting yourself first so you can serve others. So it's like doing everything, being self-first, self-minded, so that you can then be selfless. It's not even selfless, but it's so you can serve others, give everything to others, because you've always given to yourself first. Because it's like all those things that we hear, like you can't like help anyone. What is it, from an empty cup?
I can't pour from an empty cup.
All these things, right? And we hear it and you're still like, but for me it's like, when I was able to really kind of and I really aggressively came out and I was like, I am selfish. I'm going to put myself first always. And as a mother, it's quite jarring, I think, when you're in the selfless mindset to hear that. But I had to really come out and sort of say that a lot for myself as well. And then I just watched it unfold around me, what selfish did for everyone else around me, and everyone's lives got a lot better when, in my home especially, when I acted selfishly. And selfishly is not what we think selfish is. It's self first. It's just going, I'm going to do everything I can to take care of myself so then I have the space to show up for you without resenting you because I'm giving you what I actually really needed for myself because I didn't take care of myself.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think we're both mums. We've all got little kids. And we were talking before, and I think watching your content has made me be a better mother by being more selfish or being more self-first. How do you feel like your relationship as a mother has evolved from when you had your first to now having your fourth?
Oh my God, so much. I mean, to be honest, I totally had a really tough time after having Bobby, my fourth. I was so exhausted still from the years of Triangl and raising two children during that period of running a business and traveling the world and everything. So when I had Bobby, it was like it wasn't like I was like, yeah, nailed it. I was like went into that just really, it was terrible. But probably a year into Bobby's life was when I started to get a real handle on how I was going to navigate everything. Bobby was a terrible sleeper, terrible baby, really refluxy. It was horrific. But so with Oscar, when I had Oscar during Triangl. I was still trying to run this business. I had a baby. I was so deeply unhappy anyway within the business. I'd lost my identity. I didn't know who I was. I had no friends. We were isolated, all of these things. So I gave everything to Oscar thinking that would fulfill me. And it did to an extent because it's nice. You have a baby and he was kind of all I had. And, I was with him for 2 years without spending more than 3 hours without him, which at the time I was like so proud of that. Yep. When on reflection, I'm just like, you're a crazy person. Like that is insane.
And you breastfed for the
whole time. Never expressed. There was no bottle. It was just like me on demand.
Physically, emotionally, mentally.
Oh my God. And I thought that it was just the only thing that I could do. And I felt like it was just like it was something that I thought was really impressive and made me feel like I was achieving something because Triangl at that period of the business had really outgrown me and I didn't really know where I fit into it anymore. Whereas now, very different. And the thing is, I'm so transparent with my kids now about what I do and there's no shame because I've done so much work on myself to know where I land with things. Like I'm going to Sydney for work, but I'll tell my children, the two that understand, I tell them what I'm doing there and why I'm there and then I'm coming back. And now they used to cry when I left at the very beginning and did all those things because they had that feeling of, and it wasn't their own feeling, it was actually me that they were feeling. They're feeling my anxiety, my worry that I was leaving. Whereas now they're just like, we want to come next time. And they made me write on the fridge, next time Mummy goes to Sydney, Oscar and Ollie can come too. But it's like fun for them and they get it and they're curious and it's like I'm happy now and therefore they are happy. It's like a very simple kind of, I guess, equation in that sense. And I've seen that happen with Oscar straight through to now, when he was a baby to now that he's almost 9.
I really feel like motherhood and this idea of being a martyr are so intrinsically linked and particularly in Australian culture. I think there's this idea that we do have to do it all, whereas overseas it seems a little bit more normal to get help, whether it's from a village or like paid help.
Yes.
Have you found that?
Oh my God, so much. So even though we had no one in Hong Kong and no one in Monaco when we lived over there, paid help was the norm.
Yep.
So at least I had that support during the day or, when we went away or whatever it was. And then I came back to Australia with Oscar and Ollie and it was just like shame, shame, shame. And I remember just being really, I remember thinking, bugger this, I'm not falling into this trap. I'm going to get a nanny and I'm going to just keep continuing that and I remember doing it just knowing the judgment. I could feel it. Like I could feel the judgment thrown at me that, oh, Erin's just never with her kids and she's this and she's that. And I was a little bit because I was really struggling. I was going through a really tough time. But the judgment here and even I did a podcast about it, the difference between in overseas, they're nannies and they're helpers and they have these names. Here it's like, oh, I just have a babysitter. Yeah. Because it's this casual thing. Like it's just a one-off because it's usually me that looks after my kids, but sometimes I get help. Where it's like I have three nannies that like rotate because I have 4 children and Zach and I work, my husband and I work. So it's so different here. And it's this martyr mentality of I do it all, but I resent the world for making me do it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you have a choice, actually. Yeah. You have a choice as to whether you get help. If you're fortunate enough to get help, you have a choice. You don't have to fall into this pattern just because it's the norm around you to be miserable, taking care of your children 24/7, not having any time or space for yourself, you know?
Yeah, I feel like I was definitely guilty of that. Even asking my parents, I felt weirdly guilty to be like, oh, can you just come for a couple of hours so I can wash my hair? I would never be like, I want to go and get a facial. Can you come and watch my kids? I had to make up an excuse or like, oh, I've got to do a board call or something. It could never just be,
I just want some
I just
time.
need help or I just want me.
Yes, you had to explain it away.
What do you think was the tipping point, like to go from almost like a version of martyrdom with Oscar where you're just like, I have to do everything myself and this is where I'll find fulfillment. When did you realise that wasn't sustainable or even potentially healthy for you?
I think it was when I came back to Australia, because in Europe I had the support around me and that was kind of normalised. So that I sort of moved into that, and it was just kind of the way that it was, and there was no judgment. In a way, coming back to Australia and feeling that judgment was when I thought, this feels wrong. This doesn't feel fair. Like I'm struggling, but even if I wasn't struggling, I wanted, and I also came back to Australia and suddenly, whereas in Europe when there were nannies everywhere and there were women out, there was no judgment, and then I came back to Australia and I started judging people that were out without their kids, and I was like, this feels wrong. This doesn't feel. So I naturally, when that happens, I'm a bit like I like to stand up for those things and be like, well, I'll be the one to like hold the torch and be like, I have a nanny. Everybody have a nanny because I want to go out, because I want to go for a walk, because I want to do Pilates, you know. And I really, that was it. It took all of those eyes on me that were very judgmental and negative for me just to be like, well, you know what? And it was that kind of feeling of I'm not going to not get help because of that judgment. So I'm not going to shrink away from it. So I kind of like stood up to it. And then really just started to like push that. And things have changed. So it was 4 or 5 years ago. So much, fortunately, has changed since then. I think, you know, women and mental health and wellness has become louder, and things have just really shifted. But at the start, it really felt like me just going up against these like women that I just knew were judging me. I could just picture them in my head, and I was like, well, screw you. I'm going to keep talking about it. And like it was funny because the more you did, the more you'd find that they would suddenly be more open, because the thing is they all got help as well. They just hid it. Like they would kind of be like, oh yeah, well I'm home though, even when the au pair's there, or like it was always this made up thing. Whereas I would just be like, oh no, I just have like the nanny at home so I can go out. Like I don't, you know, like I had to make a point. I just felt like this thing in me to be like, no, I'm going to stand up for this because it's just so ridiculous. And I am not going back into feeling like that, you know.
How has it changed how you feel as an individual about yourself?
Oh, so much. Like in every single way. I genuinely didn't really like spending time with my kids when I wasn't feeling well. Like I really didn't, because I resented them so much.
Yep.
And every time I was with them, I was just waiting for the opportunity to get away from them, you know, like, because I just was like, you've taken everything from me. Like I don't know. I really.
Who am I?
Yeah.
Where am I? Yeah.
And that was nothing to do with them. It was all me. And I did a lot of work on myself to work through that. And I had to be honest about that, because I had to say, like, I don't really want to hang out with them. Like, what's wrong with me? Am I awful? And when I realized it was just that I was so in my head, not liking who I was, I always had a choice to do what I wanted to do. And most women do. We just don't choose that. And so now that I set up my day the way that I want it, and I do all these things for myself, and I put myself in a great position mentally and emotionally and physically every day, I love hanging out with him. Like, I look forward to it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, that's nice to feel that way, because I really didn't, because I went so far. Like, with Oscar, I was in one extreme of giving him everything for 2 years, which burnt me out so much that then I was like, everyone needs to be away from me at all times. I don't want to be around you. I just want to escape you, to now being at a place where I'm like, okay, cool. It's nice to still spend time without them because you need to, but like I genuinely love being with my children, and I think they're just the best things in the world, and being a mum's the best thing in the world. I never thought that until I started to actually find that happiness and fulfillment within myself.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
You do such a good job.
Thank you.
Something you've spoken about is that when you were with Craig and when Triangl was really successful, you had a funny relationship with money where you almost didn't want to spend it, or you felt guilty spending it and spent it in secret.
Yes.
Obviously that's changed.
Yes.
How has that changed and why?
Yeah, this was only something that I unpacked recently because it was so weird, because it was my money at Triangl as much as it was Craig's, and he never like made me tell him what I was spending my money on, or, you know, it was always very mutual and it was a joint account. But I just had such a lack of self-worth really early on in that business, because it grew so quickly and scaled so quickly, and it was just Craig and I, and he was definitely the more dominant one in the relationship and in the business. I felt very quickly like I'd become obsolete. Like I just didn't feel like I was doing enough. I didn't feel like it was enough compared to him. I didn't know how to run this really globally successful business. So I kind of felt like I put it into my head almost that I was like working for him, and got into this weird mentality of sort of none of this is actually mine. And in a way, it was this kind of Australian self-deprecating thing of like, oh, we're not really that successful. Oh, we didn't really do anything, that Craig and I both did. But he did that with, I guess, a level of knowing that he was doing great things, whereas I really took that on as like that was fact. Like, we just, it was just like lucky. It was just Instagram, like whatever, like no big deal. And so I really took that on. So I just felt like I didn't deserve any of what I had around me. Yeah. So when it came to spending money, I was really secretive about it, because I felt so much shame about the fact that I didn't think I was doing anything in the business, which is so crazy, because I was doing...
You're doing so much?
So much, like truly working around the clock constantly, like even with Oscar, and through all of that, you know, it just moved into being a building role where we were in control of like building this business to then the business started to like just do its own thing. It was just like a juggernaut that just took its own shape and just went that way. So what I was doing was more maintenance and more management, but didn't feel as useful. And I just didn't have any mentors. I didn't ever like talk to anybody. I didn't know that this was a very normal feeling and a normal thing to happen. And I just like internalized all of that, and so felt like I wasn't doing anything, therefore felt like I didn't deserve to spend any money, therefore would just buy things and like hide them from Craig, and I'd spend it was like my money, but I'd act like it wasn't my money. It was a very, very weird mentality that I only very recently... It wasn't until Craig and I settled, which was only last year, after I exited Triangl, it was only after that I started to really understand my relationship with money, because everyone has a money story. And I usually have a great money story. I've always been very much like I spend a lot, I make a lot, I spend a lot, I make a lot, which my husband hates. He hates that. He's like, oh, yeah, you're so abundant with your money. I'm like,
it's called manifestation.
I'm like, money is energy, and it will just come into my life and leave and come as it needs to, which he absolutely hates. He's like, but you're still going to set budgets, right? I'm like, yes, I am. I'm not that.
Limitless.
Yeah, it's an endless budget. Anyway, but I'm starting to get a handle on my money story a lot more, which is... just, you know, stems a lot from Triangl, of not feeling like I was deserving of it, and therefore spending it like it wasn't mine, and like spending it, like churning through it. A lot of like the money that I had early on from exiting Triangl, I even just went to say then from Craig, but it wasn't from Craig, it was from Triangl. But that money, I felt like it was from Craig, so I was spending it like I wanted it gone, like I wanted to get it out.
We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and I think so many people will be feeling that if they reach a certain level of financial success or any type of success, that they're going to feel a different way about themselves or about the world around them. Yeah. What do you think of that concept as someone who's been on both sides of that?
I mean, 100% money takes away some level of stress. You know, it gives you a lot more choice. There's a lot, like I always say, I don't want money, I want financial freedom, because that is a good feeling when you can pay bills without thinking, when things crop up like a car needing something fixed, or something in the house breaking in thousands of dollars. There's freedom with that when you're like, oh, I don't have to find the money for that, I have it. But whether wealth makes you feel different internally, like people thinking that it will, like, oh, if I just had this, then I'll be happy. It's like absolutely does not exist. Like it's not possible to feel happier the more money you have. You can feel freer, or it can give you more options to perhaps be happier, more resources, more time, but it's not directly going to, because I was expecting that when it happened. I was like, okay, now I'm going to be the happiest I've ever been. Now I have all this money, and it was the opposite for me. It was like my mental health just kept declining because I didn't put any value in working on myself because I just thought that the money was going to be enough, because society kind of tells us that. So for me, yes, I have financial freedom now, but my happiness comes from nothing to do with that. Like that is like, and I say this to my husband and he doesn't believe me, but I'm like, if everything went and all that, you'd be immediately like, oh my God, this is a bit of a change. But I know that I have the skills and the tools to get through whatever challenge it is. And at the end of the day, I mean, we didn't have any money because when I exited Triangl, I didn't get paid out. So we lived in a cute little house in Richmond. Zach was supporting me for a while there, and we were really happy, And there's a lot of stress going on, and I was hopeful that I would get my money one day, but I didn't know. And so I had to build this life without expecting that to come. And I was really happy, and because it's just like, it doesn't actually matter, because what all that matters is when you're faced with a problem or a challenge or a stressful situation, how you see that situation in front of you, whether you see it as like something you can work through or whether you see it as something that's going to end you. And I just wanted to be in that position where I wanted to work through things always. And I worked really hard on myself to get there. So it's like with everything that's coming up for me or everything that's been, it's all just around me. It's not happening to me. Like money, it's like there's nice bits about money, but honestly, I know that if it all disappeared, it would be like a little bit tough for a while, but I would get through it. And I know that we'd be happier than ever. And I also have a lot of faith that whatever is supposed to happen to you happens. So if I'm meant to lose all my money, then there's going to be something incredible that's going to come from that. So like I have a lot of faith in that. So I know that it's all going to be okay.
Oh, that's such a beautiful place to be in.
Yeah.
Something a lot of people talk to us about, or I find a bit triggering, is people are like, you're so lucky. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like you just got that. You were so lucky that happened at the right time. And I'm like, yes, but I also worked really hard.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I was smart enough to make those decisions.
Yes.
How do you feel about your relationship with luck?
Yeah,
and do you think you're lucky, or do you think you've just worked really hard?
I think that luck and timing comes into everything. And I always like to say that I'm fortunate instead of I'm lucky. So if someone says you're really lucky, I'm like, yeah, we are very fortunate. Because it's Triangl I still believe that Triangl would have been the success that it was without the luck and timing of Instagram. It just would have taken longer. So I'm kind of like, yeah, we're really fortunate that that Instagram was going gangbusters while we were launching. But I don't think that it's the reason why Triangl was like, we didn't sit there and just like with our, like hands under our like legs being like, let's just watch this go. Like we had to work really, really hard when we saw an opportunity. And this is, I think, the thing that people just totally discount is like, we saw an opportunity with our business. And so we went for it. And I think that Instagram was a really big opportunity and we were very fortunate, but we still saw that opportunity and we capitalized on it and we ran a million miles an hour to make that work. I believe in luck and timing, absolutely, but when it comes to my life, I don't feel like I'm lucky at all. I feel like everything has happened for good and for bad for whatever reason to get me into exactly the position I'm in now. And I just don't think luck comes into that for me, I think luck is around you, but I think because it's kind of like when people are like, oh, you're like when people win the Taslot or whatever and they're like, oh, they're so lucky they won millions of dollars. And then when you break it down, it's like, I think that would be a terrible thing to win that kind of money. If you have no idea how to spend it, how to use it, or suddenly your friends and family are all like vultures around you trying to get some of your money. And you can see the stories about people that have won big amounts of money like that. It generally results in not generally, I have no idea, but a lot of the stories are that it's really, people are really miserable afterwards because it's like, and people are like, oh, you're so lucky. And there's people probably thinking, I'm not lucky. Like everything fell to shit when I got all that money. Like I lost all my friendships. Because the thing is, it's like whatever happens to you takes you out of the place that you're in, So for us, even with Triangl, it was like, we didn't want it. We didn't plan to start a global business. We didn't plan. So even though there were these amazing things that happened from it, it yanked us out of any connection with anyone we'd ever known, because suddenly we were these two people that were just hovering in our own like stratosphere of success, couldn't talk to anyone about it. Like our families had no idea what to say. Our friends, we couldn't get advice from anyone because they'd never achieved the level of success that we were in. And that's really tough, you know? And for me, it was really tough. So it's like, it's not luck. It's just an opportunity that you go with, but there's consequences to whatever opportunity that happen. And like, it's not all like, you know, like blue sky. You know, and I think that's something that people, unless you're in it, because whenever I say this stuff, I always think if it was me that hadn't done this, I'd still be listening being like, oh, nah. Yeah. Like, you're full of shit. Yeah. Like, A, money will make me happy, and B, if I'd had Instagram launching with my business, I'd be pretty, and it's like, you would if you'd made the right decisions based off that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of people don't. It's like when people even like attack like trust fund babies, and I like to think of this, like I think of this a lot, and it's like, there are trust fund babies that do incredible things with their money, and there are trust fund babibies that literally don't do anything, and they wouldn't be happy. There'd be no fulfillment. So the ones that did really great things, yes, they had an opportunity because they had this money, but they used it to do something great. So like, why is that just ignored? That they worked hard and they were ambitious, and yes, they had opportunity, but then it's not luck, it's just an opportunity. So I think that's kind of, you know.
Yeah, and how you separate the idea of luck, the idea of being given an opportunity that other people aren't, and then this concept of the work that you actually do to get there.
I think when people are like, oh, you're so lucky, like you're so lucky, I think that's just like a victim mentality, to be honest. I think when people think that it's all luck, it's because they're thinking, I'm not lucky and you got lucky. And it's like, well, would you have done what I did if you had what I had in front of me? I don't know. Like that's the real kind of test. Like if you'd have been able to do it, because that bit was luck and a bit of an opportunity, but what you do with it is where the real kind of challenge and test comes into it.
And there's the beauty of hindsight in commentary like that, isn't there? Like when we were starting both of our businesses, a lot of the people that made those types of comments didn't want to get involved at the start. No one put their hand up and said, oh, this looks like a lot of fun while you're self-funded doing all this shit work yourself. Can I get involved? But once it became something bigger, then everyone said, oh, you're things like, you're so lucky, or, oh, why didn't you ask me to get involved? And, you know, things like that. I'm like,
yeah. I know, right? I know. It's
hindsight's
like,
a beautiful thing.
Hindsight's a beautiful thing. It really is. Yeah.
So you've touched on a few times that you focus on doing work on yourself. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I've done a lot, and it was a result of really coming back to Australia after exiting Triangl and hitting a real rock bottom. And I just kind of thought, well, I don't want to feel like this for the rest of my life. And that was basically me living in this life of luxury, especially in Monaco when I was there, and feeling completely numb. And I just thought, well, part of me thought, is this what everyone feels like that has money? Is this just the norm? This is like, I was like, is this the payoff that everyone with this level of wealth and this level of disposable income and this level of cash is internally miserable? And I was like, no, that can't be it. There's something internally that's wrong, that's separate to the external. So then I got back to Australia, and I was around everyone that I'd known, and I just felt so lonely and miserable, and I just thought, I can't pretend anymore that I'm okay. So I went and started, I really gave myself to working on myself, and that just took so many shapes. It was being honest with everybody around me, as opposed to coming back and pretending I was still like Miss Triangl and like global person and so successful and like amazing. Like my ego was like, let's hang on to this for as long as possible because this is great. But my, you know, soul was like, no, you are unhappy. This is terrible. We can't keep pretending. As soon as I let go of the ego, and so when people would ask me like, how are you? I would actually say, I'm actually really miserable. This is really tough. I'm actually really struggling. I don't really know where I fit in. And the more I just shared like that with people, without dumping on people, but just being honest, and the more vulnerable I was, the more I saw that was where I was so deeply craving connection, because I hadn't had it for the entirety with Triangl. So as soon as I got back and I started to feel connection with people, I was like, that feels so good. And I'm connecting with people through being honest, so I'm just going to keep on this path. So I was, you know, I went all into the spiritual things, you know, and that was really important for me, like whether that's therapy for people or more spiritual, because I needed to go back into the last 8 years, and I needed to really uncover, like, how did I end up hating Craig so much? How did I hate Triangl? How did I not like my children? Like, why do I not want to be around them? How did I get an eating disorder? How did I not find fulfillment in Triangl, and why did that not happen? Because it was so great, and am I broken? All these things, and I had to go back. You like, as annoying as it is, and I wanted to go into that process and move forward. You just want to go in and be like, I'm ready to heal, so can we heal from now onwards? Can we not go into the past? Because that's annoying. And you get into that and you realise very quickly that it's going to be a very long and painful journey, and you just have to kind of strap in and be like, all right, I'm going to commit to this. And I was really fortunate. I'd already met Zach, and he was an incredible support, and having him around me, and for it's like having anyone around you that's that one or two people, and for me it was him, was so encouraging, because I just knew, because I would go into these things and it'd be like one step forward, no, it would be like two steps forward, one step back, and I'd like go into these sessions and it'd be very transformative, and you'd unlock something, and then you'd go back into your normal life, which for me was like drinking too much, taking drugs, still restricting food, all the bad patterns that I didn't know yet how to break. And then over the kind of couple of years of consistent work, it's kind of like, it's like physical exercise. It's the same thing for your mental health. You just have to be consistent with it. Things started to like fall away, and I just started to feel better and more hopeful and stronger. I think that was the main thing. Like, you would go into a situation where you used to be, like, for example, Craig was an obvious one, because everything had blown up in our relationship professionally and romantically, and it was the biggest trigger I had. There were no boundaries. Like, Zach was there for all of this, and I would like physically shake if like his name came up on the, and that I watched that evolve to, things got worse with Craig. We were going through a legal battle. It was hideous, but I got better. So I got stronger. So his name, and I would be like, I'm not going to answer that now. I don't have to, or, and like, I don't have to buy into that, or like he would text and I would just ignore it, or I'd write back and say, I'm not taking this on right now. And I watched myself set boundaries, which I think was like the first step for my healing, was to actually be like, I don't have to be everything to everyone, because it's killing me. So once I sort of learned to do that, then things started to, and that's the good thing about that healing kind of getting better mental health journey, is you do see progress. And when you do, you're like, oh my God, I have to keep going. I can't go back. I can't fall back. And things have just kept evolving since then,
How do you, I think it's really interesting, this concept of how our self-worth shows up in different relationships.
Yes.
And what are we taking into that dynamic? What are we projecting? What are we absorbing from the other person?
Yeah.
How has your relationship with yourself evolved over the course of what seems like 2 major romantic relationships?
Yes.
But even beyond that, with friends and family, and when have you?
So much. I'm like the queen. I've always been selfish anyway. Like, it was something that I just like, and I just did things that I wanted to do, and without hurting anyone around me, but I always kind of knew what I wanted to do and what I didn't, and I honoured that as much as possible. But in the last few years, I've just been very clear about I think I got really clear about what my values in life were in the last few years, whereas if you'd asked me that at the end of Triangl, or during Triangl, it would have been Triangl. What are your values? Triangl, Craig, maybe Oscar, that was it, And then after that, I had nothing, know, and I kind of would be like, oh, I think it's my kids, but I didn't know, and had none. Whereas I got very, very clear on what my values were in the last few years. And I use them to dictate how my entire life works, which is so simple, because my values are so simple, and they don't have to be complex. They're, my family and my work and my physical and mental health. And like everything else, like they're the priorities. Like, I kind of see values as priorities as well, as long as they're like aligned to who you are, or who you really are. And so once I got really clear on those, every decision that didn't serve that was a no. And so with my friends and my family, they know now. And it was at the beginning, it wasn't like all like, hey, it was like me being like, I'm not going to come to that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give you that. I think also it was a very, very tough dynamic. And Craig and I went through this at the very start of having money, and we wanted to give it to everybody. We wanted to give money to family and then friends and then hosts and then And then you realise that it actually was setting people backwards. And then it created this very weird dynamic where and it was like, now should we be paying? Like,
do we do this all the time?
Yeah. And so I remember Craig was much more against it than I was, and it used to really upset me. Whereas Craig just had a very strong sense of self-worth. And so now I'm in a position where I'm not as giving. And it's not that I'm not, it's like more money, like I'm giving of myself when I'm available to, but at the same time, I give myself mainly to my children and to Zach, and like that's pretty much it. And then I give myself to my, work, like my employees. Well, that's going to be next year mainly. And like, that's it. I don't have enough to give anyone else outside of that. So my values dictate sort of how I live my life daily. And then there's no, like for me, there's like barely any social life. There's pretty much nothing else except for those few things. And I'm really happy with that. And I think everyone knows my values now in my family and within my friends. So when I'm like, oh, I'm not coming to that, and I don't even give a reason because they just know. And at the beginning, I think it was really jarring and people were like, oh gosh, you're so rude or whatever. Whereas now I see people around me doing the same thing. They're like, oh, I can't come to that today, but thanks so much. And you're like, yes.
Yeah,
because you've got to honour
what
what you want, and sometimes you'll make a bad decision and you might upset someone and offend someone, and then you've got to assess that. And if I've hurt someone's feelings, I try very hard to have compassion and say, I'm really sorry that I did that, and I didn't really actually think that was going to upset you, and I didn't realise you'd actually catered for me already, and I'm really, really sorry. I don't you don't give an excuse, you just genuinely mean it. Just say, I'm really sorry. That was not very nice of me. The freedom as well when you admit that you're wrong, which I think has been one of the biggest things in the last few years that has evolved my self-worth. Probably the biggest thing that's made me feel worthy is admitting that I'm wrong.
Yeah, wow.
Because when you realise, because we're all flawed, and when you can put your hand up and say, actually, that was actually not very nice of me. That was not very good. I got that wrong. I said that wrong. It allows other people to not only feel validated in that, but also feel like then they can be wrong.
Yeah.
And like that's how it's just been this that's been the most profound thing for my self-worth, because you hold on to self-worth sometimes thinking, well, I have to be the best in my life and I love me, and that means like only me be the best me at all times. And when you really drop that and you're like, I'm striving to be a better me, which means in this moment I have freedom to fuck it up and get it wrong. And that's like the most beautiful thing, because when you just know I can make mistakes, but tomorrow I'm actually going to be better because I'm going to learn from those mistakes as well. That's when my self-worth just like exploded internally. And I was like, whoa, okay, now I really get what this means. Like I get it now.
100%. I feel like we can definitely resonate with that. I think the other thing that's interesting is we've had, a different journey with the entrepreneurial community, and you've spoken a lot about how you felt very isolated and alone, and you're obviously so independent. I think something we learned early on is asking for help, asking other entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And something we talk so much about with other entrepreneurs is like the mistakes they've made and how we can learn from them.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the entrepreneurial community has changed and evolved?
So much. I mean, I didn't know it because I was on my own thinking that I was the only one who had a business, because I just didn't engage with anyone.
You were one of the first pioneers.
Yeah, and it was pretty lonely, but I kind of liked that to an extent. Now I think the community is incredible and only getting better, because people are getting more and more honest and more vulnerable and more compassionate, and more people really starting to think about why they want to do something, as opposed to this whole, I want to start a business and like scale it and exit, and this weird narrative that has been around for the last little bit of like people just going into business to make a lot of money and get out. And you still hear people saying it today, and you just think, God, so you know what? There's lessons for you to learn. I'm not going to say anything. But, I think that the community is so, it's just so different. Like everyone's so honest and raw. And I love talking to other entrepreneurs and founders so much, because, it's why I tell my story, because I tell the story of, I'm not interested in telling the story of how successful we were if I can't tell the story of how hard it was and how miserable I was at times and how much it broke me, because I think that's the most important thing for people to know. Because if you don't really have clarity around why you want to have your own business or why you want to have success, then you're going to get into a situation where I was, where you just are like, wait, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I hate this. Like, I don't want to be here, because I'll probably have a similar story of Triangl with my next brand, not with I doubt with the success because it was a very unique unicorn situation, but the same level of input but I'm going to feel completely different about it because I feel completely different. And so I want people to know that as well, because I think if you're going into having a business or you're in one and you don't do anything to work on yourself in any way, shape or form, like you are doomed. You have to have some level of self-awareness and some level of self-worth and some level of self-reflection, and you've got to keep building on that. It's the most important thing as a business owner or in business to do, you know, or in life, really, anyone.
We talk about that concept a lot, like the why of what we're doing it.
Yeah.
And we joke a lot. Like we started Willow and Blake, our first business, as a copywriting agency. No one becomes a writer to make money.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not a story you ever hear. But what I do see is the common thread between the people who achieve quote unquote financial success or business success is the passion, like the thing that kept them going through all of the inevitably shit times that you experience, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur. You need to love what you're doing, even if it's really fucking hard at the time.
And I think you can't trick. I think people are becoming more aware as well. And if you meet someone and it's an agency or it's a whatever, and you know we're meeting people all the time, you can feel the difference between a business that has the right energy and the business that doesn't have the right energy. And that energy comes down to their why and what they're doing, why they're doing. And some people might start with a great why and they lose it. That's why it's so important to because a lot of people do start with a why, but they won't refine it and cultivate it and work on it and own it. And that's when things get murky. And then you just kind of look at it and you're like, oh, this just seems like I've seen so much of it in the last 6 months because I'm so acutely aware and obsessed with psychology of people and like why was that feel weird and why is that amazing and like why did I like them in the start and then I didn't and like did I just trust it, like all of these things. And it's like the more and more we're all becoming aware of these things, the more important it's going to be to access not just your why initially, but really keep that going, like really keep that going, whether it's just you're founder-led and you're on your own or you have a team. They're all the cliches that I think we all know and they've been around for a really long time. But I think they're evolving at a rate that is going to make them the most important thing of a business, like over all these other metrics that we're used to sort of looking at within a business. Like, of course, you need a business to be profitable, but the way to get there is not going to be this linear line of like sales and funnels and marketing, and it's going to be this other like currently intangible thing that I think is going to become far more tangible. Which is around energy and your vision, and it's really exciting because I just think that is how we will have better businesses do better things to make a better world.
I totally agree. It's kind of what led us here to do this very series. We have a board, we have investors. It's really easy for us to get caught up in
day-to-day
KPIs and monetary metrics,
ROI.
Oh my God, ROI.
Return on investment.
Yeah,
Like, don't use acronyms.
Well, we sat down and we're like, well, this is getting really boring for us. So it's probably getting boring for our audience. Where's the heartbeat of Frank Body gone? We built this brand because we wanted to have authentic, real, frank conversations with people. And we're doing less and less and less of that because we're becoming more risk adverse. How do we get back to the heart and soul of the brand? And we just sat down and this came so naturally to us and our team got so excited about it. We were pumped about doing it. I'm like, oh yeah, you can't quantify it and it's really hard to define, but having that, I keep calling it the heartbeat, that's how I define it, of the brand is, or the individual is just so crucial to success.
I think for like anyone listening that's sort of thinking like, what is that for me? It's like, for me, the way I think about it is anything that is not directly quantified through a metric is going to be good. Like that's literally how business is going to go in the future. It's like anything that is just good and feels good and is about the core, the heartbeat, the core vision, the why that you can do is like that's the way it's moving forward. I agree. You know, because like that, I mean, with this new brand, it's like I'm doing the same thing. Like nothing. It's like such a weird experience because obviously I'm making product and I want to sell it, but all my ideas have nothing to do with selling the product, and I'm like, wait a minute. No, I think that's good. I'm like, I think so. Like just crazy stuff that is how it should be, because I just think that that's way more fun. And, you know, when we're in consumer products as well, most of them are not necessities, they're luxuries. So this application of of this really serious sort of like, we've got to get, it's like, well, hang on, they don't have to, you know, like, let's chill. Let's just go back to something that's a lot more organic, a lot more fun, a lot less directly involved in a marketing funnel of sales of whatever, customer retention, whatever it is, because that's where the creativity is and that's where the inspiration is for people to then find you somewhere else, or at least just like, you don't know where it links up. Like, you just never know where that, because energy and all, it just like is on a totally different wavelength to how we're working and how we're doing things today. It's like, I'm so obsessed with all of this stuff. And anytime anyone does anything that's not directly about their brand, I'm like, I'm in. Like, what is it? Let's do it.
It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of self-belief to start a business, but even more so to walk away from one, particularly one that's successful or in the eyes of everyone else successful. What advice would you have for someone who's in a business and they're thinking they want to walk away, or just any situation in life that they think they want to walk away from?
Yeah. You just got to, you know, it's like hard. I think you kind of want to say you got to listen to your gut on it, but I avoided that feeling for years. And so I wouldn't even say that. It's sort of, you just have to, it's different for everyone. Like, the way it worked for me with Triangl was I just saw my future and I wasn't happy in it. And I just thought I'd rather start again. I'm very much like I'd rather lose it all and start again than keep going with something that I'm not happy with. You know, like, I'll throw in the towel. And for me, it's like, if that was I think a lot of people weigh it up. They're thinking, what if? Like, what if I leave and this, or what if I do this and that? And I'm always like, what would you regret more? You know, I kind of work backwards from that, and I'm like, would I regret leaving Triangl more, or would I have regretted staying more? And I knew very easily I would have regretted staying, because I was like, if I just start again, then at least I'll learn stuff and it's more exciting. The start again was more exciting. There was more hope in starting again. There's more hope in change. It's just like, it's so scary because it's meant to be, because it's like the reward of like going through something terrifying and a big change, like getting out of comfort or getting out of autonomy, like that, like monotony of like your day. The reward for totally throwing that all out the window is the hope that comes with it of something new. Like, but it's got to be scary. So it's like, I think people are like, how do you overcome fear? And it's like, you just do it anyway. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's like, if you feel like you want to do something but you're too scared, you don't fight the feeling of being scared. You're just going to have to do it scared. You know?
I think it's like Bruce Lee has this quote. It's like, feel the fear but still make the move.
Yeah.
And I love that.
It's like, that's the reality. It's like, when people are like, how do you overcome fear? I'm like, you don't overcome fear. You have to step through it and then realize you've overcome it. And like, that's something that is like, it's helpful, but it's not. And I think once you've done it once, you then know that it's actually not that scary and you can do it again. You know, it's just that first time. And when it's a big thing, like leaving it, like, it's like people that are so unhappy in their job and they've got like a mortgage and they're, you know, like, and I know that's scary. Like, that's probably scarier than my situation, because, well, I didn't get my money, but like, I thought I was going to. So at the time I was like, I'll exit because I'll get paid out really well. It'll be great. But people like that, it's like, what would you regret more? You know, like paying your mortgage, at being so fucking miserable that at the end of your life, you're just thinking, why didn't I quit back then? You know, because it's like, also I always think of the worst case scenario as well in these situations. Like, for example, if I had a mortgage and my job was reliant, you know, like, it was like I needed to keep my job to pay my mortgage. So then if I lost my job, or I quit my job and I had plans to do something else and that didn't work out, and then I lost my house, what does that actually look like? And when you step through that, like, it doesn't, for most people, I would say, it's not homeless. It's like they lose their house and then they have to rent for a while. And like, who cares? Like, of course, ego comes into it and we all think, wait, we need to have the house and we need to have the thing. But at the end of the day, who actually cares? If you can just stand up to that, like, feeling of kind of stepping out your worst case scenario and like just thinking, okay, actually, we could do that. I think a lot of that comes to having a very supportive partner as well, or someone with you to kind of be on the same page as you, to be like, we'll get through that. But I like to think that, like, I think with this, even, I'm like, my business, I'm putting so much time and energy into it. And if it doesn't work, like what will happen? And I'm like, well, I'll just start something else. And like, I'll probably just write a book about how I had one good business and one failed business, or I might do this. And I think of all the things that I could do. Of course, I'm not like manifesting a failure, but I just step out the worst case scenario very quickly to take the fear out of it, to think, okay, if I lost that and we didn't get to do this, that would actually be okay. And then you can kind of find yourself in a better position to move forward with the scary thing that you need to do.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I want to talk about is, all coming from quite a privileged position where, we can pay for help and we can pay to see a psychologist. What are some simple things that people who are lacking self-worth can do to start to cultivate that sense of self-worth? Yeah.
This is one that I think about a lot because I think wellness has become so elite. It's so expensive. It's like a session. Every session's like, $200, $300. And
it's hard to get in.
Hard to get in. And, and then there's all these other things you can do, but they're like, oh, la, la, la. I don't do that much at the moment. And sure, I did a lot of work on it in the start, but the things that still work for me the most are the small things about finding a little bit of joy in my everyday and really honouring that. It's called savouring, which is like a simple thing to do. And it's just for people that are really stuck. Like when people, I had a woman ask me the other day, she said, how do you learn to like yourself? Because I don't like myself.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just like, it's just such a tough thing because it's not, you can't just learn to like yourself. You can't just go, I'm going to switch on. You have to sort of find ways, because not all it is, because the biggest thing ever is the patterns and programs that are in our brain that are operating on this thing. And so we're feeding that because we need to feed it to keep going every day. So it's finding little breaks in your day to stop that programming, like whatever it is for you. Like obviously there's big things that are great, like exercise, like physically, but small things like whatever joy you find in your day. And I always say to people to write it down or look forward to it every day. So if it's 10:30 every morning is when you go and get your second coffee or your first coffee for the day or whatever it is, and you know that you look forward to that, make sure you really, really honour that and you really do look forward to that and you really think about how that actually brings you joy in your day. And then what will happen is you'll start to seek the other things that bring you joy in your day and really land on them. That's just because otherwise we go through these moments, because a lot of people, we're waiting for because if we don't have self-worth, we're waiting for that to be validated wherever we go. So we're looking for someone to validate that we're not worthy. So when you start to train your brain to look for the things where you actually are happy and you feel good, doesn't have obviously having a coffee is not going to make you feel worthy directly, but you can't seek self-worth directly. You can't learn to like yourself directly. You have to do all the little things around it to access that again, things that you used to, because when we were little, we were all worthy. We all thought we were. We thought the world revolved around us. I used to think when my eyes closed, the world stopped. Just so self-indulgent. It's all me. So it's when you can kind of think of the things that, not going back to think of the things you did when you were a kid, but just remember how simple those things kind of were that you liked, and every moment was its own moment and it was the only moment that you had and no other moment mattered. That's how a kid works, and they have self-worth in abundance. Yeah. So if you can just do that as an adult and continually do it and then find a way to talk to someone. I always say, if you really are desperate to get in front of a therapist, get in front of a kinesiologist, get in front of someone, there are people that will be able to offer it cheaper. There are kinesiologists in training. They go to school for a year. Yeah. They offer their services for free because they're training. You're still going to get that relationship and get that feeling of I did this thing for myself. It's when people are how do you get a blow wave every week? It's so luxurious and so expensive. My sister's always God, I wish I could. I'm go find someone that can do it at home that's actually really good. If people just put that effort into actually finding what it was to make themselves feel better, there are going to be solutions to that. You're going to find those people. So it's that kind of thing as well, that if you really want to get that one-on-one, because I do think that is really important if you really need it, to start to get a couple of tools to maybe unlock a few things, and then also just practicing every day indirectly how to like yourself again. Because if you look, it's when you look at the end result, it feels so far away. Yep. And you can't do that. You have to treat it without actually saying, I want to fix that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to like myself. You just have to start to do the things around it to start to support you. And then one day, hopefully, you kind of start to go, oh my God, I actually like myself a little bit better. Like, I actually feel a little bit better about myself, and then use that feeling to propel you onto the next stage and the next step, which will hopefully be a little more involved and a little more substantial.
I agree with that so much. It reminds me of when people struggle with the concept of manifestation. I'm a big believer in this, and they project too far into the future. They look at like the biggest goal they could possibly set for themselves, and it feels completely unachievable.
Yeah.
The way you manifest is to set small, achievable targets, and you build up this confidence, and you start to like yourself more. You realize you're more capable. I think they're really similar. And I think what you talked about before with the reflection into the future of what could go wrong is a really helpful tool for people to develop self-worth, because it helps you understand what your greatest fears are. And I think our fears and our worth are so intrinsically linked. So I think there's something really interesting in the stuff you can do alone if you're willing to really face your fears and actually look at who you are as an individual.
And I think a lot of people are afraid to admit their flaws and their deepest, darkest secrets.
I think so too.
That holds them back. Like, the more, like, I talk about everything, and I feel better every time I do it, because there's no shame. We all feel as like crazy as each other. Like, we all have the same awful thoughts about ourselves and awful thoughts about different things. It's like human nature, you know. And the more, like, when you suppress that is when you're never going to find the growth. It's like you can't manifest if you feel a limiting belief about yourself. The only way to remove yourself from these limiting beliefs is to talk about them and get them out and release them, because when they're gone, then you're in this abundant mentality and everything can come your way, you know. And that's really hard to like grasp that. But the first step is to actually go, all right, I need to actually deal with the fact that I don't like this. I actually don't like that person. I'm in this terrible situation, whatever it is. And because you cannot get out of them unless you actually really acknowledge them. You can't trick yourself out of it. You can't manifest yourself out of a terrible situation and just like hope that you can like work your way there.
Not at all. No. I think that's a misconception about this concept of building self-worth and even dabbling in that space of manifestation, is that you think something true. That's not at all how it works. Like, it's very much about identifying clear pathways to getting to places and actually taking actionable steps. And that can take years. And that's what your journey sounds like. Your journey to real self-discovery took over the place over a decade.
I saw an amazing graphic where there was a woman saying if you manifest and you basically have done no work on yourself, it's not possible, because the way energy flows is it kind of moves around you. And so you have to, it was like basically saying you have to go and do this work on yourself to build this kind of energetic bubble around you, to therefore then manifest. It becomes very natural and very easy and you almost do it without thinking. But if you've done no work on yourself at all, you will not be able to manifest. Like, it will not be able to happen. And if you do manifest something, it won't be actually what it's meant to be for you, and it won't work out in the way that you wanted it to.
I think that's what you've been talking about, is this idea of taking control as well. I think I'm guilty of this, and a lot of people are. It's easier to self-project and be like, you're making me feel sad, or I feel unworthy because of you, and I need you to make me feel good.
Yes.
And it's going through that work of being like, actually, no, this has nothing to do with you. You just exist over here. I exist in my world, and I'm in control of how I feel. And I'm not responsible for your thoughts. I'm not responsible for your feelings. I'm responsible for how I feel. And I think that's something that you learn as you get older, or as you do the work.
I think so. My best friend even actually said the other day, she has a business, and she said, I would feel a lot better if not everyone around me, like if everyone around me stopped making mistakes. And it's true, right? Everyone around her, there were a lot of mistakes happening.
$20 to know who that was.
And I said to her, I said, I was really nervous to say it because we voice remember all day long, and I was like, I said, if you can have responsibility that those mistakes are happening because of you, then you are going to feel in control of that situation, versus at the moment where you feel hopeless and totally out of control because you're putting everyone else in power and you're disempowering yourself. So if you can sit there and say, everyone around me is making mistakes, what do I need to do to ensure that this doesn't happen? Suddenly you're in the driver's seat, you're empowered, it's all under your control, and then you can go out into and she was just like, oh my God. And she was like, that just really pumped me up. She's like, I feel so good. And it's so simple because we do it all the time. Like, I do it, with my husband. I'm like, if you and then I'm like, oh wait, hang on. I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't work because it's me. Like it's never, you have to, especially as like a leader, you have to have full accountability for everything that goes wrong. It is always your fault. And it's not there to be like, it's me, I'm terrible. It's actually to be like, I'm in control. I'm the powerful one. I'm in my power, and everything is because I can do it. Like it's so freeing to have that, even though initially it sounds counterintuitive, like, but everyone else is making mistakes. And it's like, no, but you can't put that on them because you can't control that. You can only control what you can control. And that's really powerful when you're a business owner to actually have that level of empowerment.
I think it's the same for motherhood as well.
Yes.
I find my kids feed off my energy.
Oh my God.
And if my energy's off, or I'm snapping, or I'm angry, that reflects back. I feel like my kids are a mirror, and I can literally see myself, and that can be really quite confronting.
Yes.
At times.
Oh yeah.
But when I take control of the situation, I'm like, I am the mum, I can control this.
Yes.
Everything seems to flow better.
Oh, yeah. If you're regulated, they're regulated. It's like that simple. And it's like, it's so nice when it happens. And then when it doesn't happen, which is quite often, it's nice to kind of be like, oh, I know. And you're almost like, well, that was good because that was a great lesson to remind me that if I'm regulated, they are. And to make sure I stay regulated even when they're driving me mad.
If you want a lesson in self-worth, patience, confidence, everything, have a child.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, exactly. It propels you forward for sure.
Now, I know we would love to keep chatting all day, but we do need to wrap up and let you get back to your very busy life. I think a nice way to finish might be to talk to our listeners. If there's someone listening today and they're really struggling with this concept of owning their self-worth and figuring out how to be selfish, what is one or two things you'd say, go and do this?
If you think selfish is a bad thing, sometimes I like to write things down. So it's like perhaps it's a good exercise to write down all the things that you think are selfish and then look back, because I think that you will find, especially as a mother or as a business owner, that the things that you think that are selfish, that in a bad way, are actually really important, basic survival, like essential things to being happy and healthy. And then perhaps if you write down in that kind of way, or you write down a list of the things that you really want to do but you think are too selfish, and then actually look at them and realize that they're not really that selfish, and they actually are things that are, or they are selfish but in a good way. I'm a big writer. I love writing everything down to get it out of my head. But I think the point is, if you're feeling like you don't know how to do it, you've got to get out of your head about whatever it is, whether that's writing things down, whether it's talking to someone. The worst thing you can do in any rut that you're in is to internalize and to suppress. It's truly if you believe in energy and holding on to energy and how bad it is for you to hold on to negative energy, and it just makes logical sense. I don't really have any concept of any of that on a sort of scientific level or anything, but I just think it makes a lot of sense. If you have a bad feeling or a bad thought and you just don't even honor it, and you're like, I'm just gonna swallow that one, it's not going to be good for you on any level. Like you're gonna either blow up later, you're going to be super reactive, for a couple of weeks, you're going to be really triggered by that same situation in 3 weeks' time. Like, it just is not good to ever internalize or suppress. So if you're at the very start of your journey, you need to find a way to get those thoughts out, even if it's like, I have some of my practitioners are like, scream into a pillow. Like there are things you can do to release this energy, but you cannot internalize it in any way, shape or form, because it's just holding you back.
I love that. I like that it's an accessible thing that anyone can do at any time too.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I'll voice memo, or I'll just talk to myself, and I'll just it's like having a burn book, and it's actually very helpful. I know people think that you shouldn't say thoughts about people out loud or be like, oh, no, but you're actually supposed to. It's actually in quite a lot of spiritual training, and I learned this, which was really extreme, but when they're like maybe not meditation teachers, but more like a little more far-flung, like oracles and some other kind of practitioners like crystal dreaming, they'll practice the art of mind bending, which is kind of going to the worst case scenario and like practicing it out. So she was saying to me, it was like, she's like, if you actually have something really frustrating happen to you and it's because of someone, have that moment of like being like, you are an absolute, and you get it out, and then you find yourself like center and and regulate really quickly. And I think that we're not told to do that. We're like told that like we have to, and like especially if you've already done a little work on yourself, that you're meant to just arrive at this place of like, yeah, that's good. They totally just absolutely screwed everything out, but this was a really good lesson for me to learn. Sometimes you don't feel that, and I think it's okay to have that frustration. So I think if you're someone that's at the very, very start and you're just feeling so stuck, starting to practice releasing and then just seeing how you feel. I mean, we always like, it's kind of like when we have a cry or like people have like a meltdown and they're like, I had a meltdown before, but now I'm good. And it's like, that's not funny. That's the reality. When you have a breakdown or a meltdown, it's a release. It's not a healthy release because it's too intense, but it is a release and you feel so much better afterwards. So if you can like do that in a smaller sense daily, there's a lot of benefit to that. So I think that's a good start for a lot of people.
That's an awesome note to end on. Thank you so much, Erin, for joining us and for being so honest and vulnerable.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure.
This episode of Selfish was recorded on Wurundjeri land. Always was, always would be Wurundjeri land.